What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be talking about a new horror film coming from Neon, which is simply titled Together. This is the feature-length writing and directorial debut of Michael Shanks and stars people like Dave Franco, Alison Brie, Damon Harriman, and more. And before we get into this video, let's hear a word from today's sponsor. So you guys know that one of my favorite things to do in this world is go to the theater and watch some movies, but one of my favorite parts of that experience is going to the concession stand and getting a big old bucket of popcorn and putting that layer of salt and butter on top, shaking it up and chowing it down during the film. But there's nothing more disappointing than getting halfway through that bucket and realizing that those salt levels are not where you want them, and that's where the sponsor of today's video, Sprout, comes into play. It's the sprayable salt that's changing the game with 75% less sodium, but all of the flavor. Sprout is perfect for popcorn, wings, soft pretzels, and even when you're cooking dinner. Just spray and enjoy the taste without overdoing the salt. And the kind folks over at Sprout are offering my viewers 10% off of their purchase if you head on over to Sprout.com and use promo code Perez at checkout. Again, head on over to Sprout.com and use promo code PEREZ at checkout for 10% off of your order today. So what are you waiting for? Get your Sprout on. And a big thanks to those kind folks over at Sprout for sponsoring today's video. So over the course of the last few years, Neon and A24 have just been like staples in the horror genre. While there's tons of other studios like Blumhouse that are known for a little bit more of the generic horror with, you know, something that stands out here or there, I've really appreciated what Neon and A24 have done. Even if I don't like a movie that they release, they always have the most interesting films that are in the horror genre in the modern day. So here we are talking about a new film coming from Neon that stars Dave Franco and his wife Alison Brie in a film about relationships, a film that deals with a lot, and we're going to get into it in just a moment. This is a film that the trailers really pulled me in on, and having just gotten home from seeing it, I'm still kind of like stewing over certain things. We're going to talk through it right now. So before we get into my thoughts on the film, let's get into what this film is all about. Together focuses on a long-term couple known as Tim and Millie, played by Dave Franco and Alison Brie, who relocate to the countryside and end up going on a hike only to fall into a mysterious cave. After Tim ends up drinking water from a pool that's inside this cave, their bodies begin to physically merge in strange and grotesque ways. As their limbs fuse and codependence intensifies, they both endure painful transformations that mirror the emotional entanglement that they've always shared. Throughout the film, a haunting allegory for love, identity, and isolation unfolds. I want to start this off by giving a lot of praise to Dave Franco and Alison Brie, who are actually a real-life married couple, as they play a couple here that's struggling when we first meet them. As I already mentioned in that synopsis breakdown, they're moving to the countryside, and it's specifically because Alison Brie's character has a new job. But her boyfriend, long-term boyfriend, they've been together for over a decade now, he is a musician, doesn't really have much going for himself, and is striving to be a musician in New York City, but they end up moving to the countryside. He resents her for it, but he wants to support her, so immediately we're set up kind of with the tone of these two individuals that she just wants to be with him. She wants to be married. She wants to grow a life with him and kind of have a more stable life. And he's still trying to chase dreams in a way that now has made her resent him because she gave him plenty of time to do that, and it doesn't really feel like he's stepping up in other areas. And then on the flip side, she's trying to, you know, solidify something and wants him to be a part of that life, but she feels like she's trapping him, and he himself also makes her feel like he feels trapped in this relationship. So immediately we're kind of set up into a relationship that's built with some resentment. There are elements about the relationship that feel disconnected. They're not having a lot of sex, and just in general this relationship seems to be a little bit broken. And I thought it was a really interesting concept when I saw the trailer, because as I already mentioned in that synopsis breakdown, over the course of the film they start to actually physically merge. And this film has a lot to say when it comes down to identity within a relationship and just the codependence of a relationship, and how a lot of people in relationships do lose themselves in relationships. As somebody who just got married last year, I've been with my wife now for 11 years. We were long distance for 3.5 years of that. I can definitely relate to a lot of this film. There were moments in our relationship where one of us was pushing for one thing or was trying to do something with our lives in a different direction that sometimes had us bumping heads. And at times made somebody feel alone, made somebody feel like they weren't as important. And it wasn't always that, but I think the balance of how it was all approached wasn't always perfect. Thankfully, my wife and I pushed through, and today we're the happiest we've ever been. We have the greatest, just like, kind of synced minds, and we work really, really well together. I'm very grateful in the modern dating world that I don't have to deal with all that, and that I have a partner that truly feels like a partner. But with all that said, I could totally relate to what this film has to say about identity, because not even in just my own life, I've seen so many friends that have been in relationships, and most recently a really close friend of mine that in the last few years, I feel just lost himself in the relationships that he was in. And within that, there was this element of just feeling like his identity was gone, and there was this codependence and this need to kind of like try to force certain things that ultimately like would at times make the relationship stronger, but that in moments also make it weaker, and in other moments make it kind of violent, and other times make it really just angry and fueled with love and fueled with rage, in this way that just was kind of creating a monstrous relationship. And this film in a lot of ways touches on the notion of the monstrosity that your relationship can become if you don't try to find balance, if you don't try to become one as a team. But at the same time, how there are couples who will kind of become one in a way where both of them are kind of gone now. They've become this unified thing that isn't really either one of them anymore. And so I think that this film has a lot to take away from it. I think there's a lot of different metaphors, a lot of allegories you can take from this film. And I think there are going to be certain people that say, well, this is what the ending of the film is trying to say. And there's going to be another percentage of people saying, no, this is what the ending of the film is trying to say. And I don't think either person would be wrong, because I think this is the kind of film that makes you want to think. Because this is definitely the kind of film that makes you want to think. It's definitely the kind of film that I could see myself revisiting down the line and enjoying a lot more, maybe catching up on a couple of things that I missed throughout the course of the runtime. But one thing I definitely got to praise about this film are the technical aspects. The cinematography here is great, and it very much added to moments of claustrophobia, and any of the creepy moments was definitely thanks to not only the cinematography, but the musical score and the sound design. There's a couple of moments in this film that are pretty uncomfortable to watch, or that are pretty tense, and had me feeling uncomfortable just with the really good sound design in the theater, or the good audio in the theater. And having seen the film alone, you know, it definitely had its moments that had me feeling a little bit creeped out. Maybe not scared. I don't think I'm going to lose any sleep, but, you know, definitely had those moments where I got some chills, that little quick goosebump feeling, which is something I love to feel in a horror film, because while I wouldn't call this film scary, it just has moments that are unsettling. And I think when you can watch a horror film that makes you feel that, they did something right, and this film definitely has those moments. But outside of the technical aspects in terms of sound design, and when it comes down to cinematography, which were some of the better parts of this film, as well as some really solid lighting throughout the course of the film, I think where this film really shines is in our two main leads, played by Franco and Alison Brie. As I mentioned, they're already a married couple, and I think they are incredible here. You can definitely see that their chemistry is real. They were able to play a real couple in this movie and make it feel believable. And you can tell they probably pulled from the times in their life where the relationship hasn't been too good, or some arguments, or times where they've had a disconnect, to make those moments where the characters have that disconnect feel all that more real. And at its core, this is a film that really does have a lot to say about just how dangerous codependency in a relationship can be. You know, I look at my relationship, and while my wife and I definitely always want to be with each other and, you know, love spending time with one another, and we have the best days when we are together, we also are two people that are into different things. We also are two people that have our own, you know, time that we want to have, or sometimes going to hang out with other friends. Or in the case of myself, I like to sit here in front of the camera and talk to all of you guys quite often, and my wife is super comfortable with that. We don't really hold any sort of expectations over one another, but there are a lot of relationships that do, and I can definitely remember times in my current relationship and in past relationships where that was the case, where, you know, there was this element of trying to always appease the other person and trying to be what they wanted to be, but also resenting them at times for it, and also wanting to do something completely different. And so you think you don't want to be with them, but then you kind of really do. And it creates this toxic circle where the love is not really at the forefront. That unifying element is not really at the forefront. And I think that this film captures that really well, adding in this body horror element to it that at times was pretty grotesque, but also really really enticing to watch. The visuals of the film are really, really cool as they start to kind of find themselves merging and trying to do everything they can to kind of disconnect from one another. If you've seen the trailer, there's a scene where they're gonna cut each other apart from being attached. And so this film definitely has those body horror moments and then has nice touches of levity to kind of bring things down, which is where I feel like the film was able to kind of do what most, like some of the best horror films do, right? Which is just the ability to have you in these tense moments, but just have these small sprinklings of humor to kind of break the tension ever so slightly, but never so much that the film felt like it was going for like horror comedy. It's far more of a horror film. It's far more of a psychological horror film with a body horror element with just these nice sprinklings of humor to really be able to kind of flesh out a really cohesive story here. Now, with all that said, while I found the film to be incredibly well acted, incredibly clever, really interesting, and has all these interesting allegories and the performances were great, all that stuff, it's one of those things where I don't know that the ending is going to work for everybody, and I'll be honest in saying that I don't fully know if the ending 100% works for me. I saw what they were going for with the ending of this film, and on one hand, I really appreciate it. On one hand, I felt like it was very clever, but if this is any indication, the second the movie was ending, in the last like 30, 40 seconds of the film, I was kind of starting to think, oh, this is kind of teetering into goofy. Then I got up as the credits started to roll and I looked around, and most people in the theater that were anywhere near me were all like, what the fuck was that? Or just simply just saying stuff like, what's going on? Or I didn't expect that. Or I had other people I was listening to on the way out that were like, well, what did you expect from the film? And the other guy was like, not that. And so there was definitely a mixed bag of emotions in that theater where it seemed like anybody I was around was either snickering with one another with the way that the film wraps up. And I can totally understand why. The final like 2 minutes of the film are both like really interesting and really engaging, but also the final second of the film is either going to make you go, that's interesting, or make you kind of be like, what did I just see? Or just flat out have you chuckling. I find myself somewhere in the middle because I really appreciated what this film was saying throughout the entirety of the runtime. I found that while it was slow in moments, it's ultimately very well paced, and I found that majority of the film was really engaging on a narrative level. But I just couldn't help but feel this part of me that was just like, I don't know that this film really kind of stuck the landing, because while there's all these elements about, you know, these allegories and about relationships that I've talked about, the one thing I haven't mentioned, which the trailers have kind of stayed away from, but I won't say too much about it, but just to mention it, there is like a paranormal kind of cult element to this film that leads to why this is happening in the film. I won't say much more on it, but I feel like that was a little bit undercooked. That was an element of the film that just kind of feels like it's there to explain why this is happening to our two characters, but I don't feel like they explored it enough for it to feel like it was a substantial piece of the film, which left the last act of the film feeling like they were unraveling things, but also left me with some questions. And then you have the final moments of the film that ultimately just had me a little shaky in terms of how I feel about it. It's the kind of movie that I think another viewing will maybe help me kind of solidify whether I like or not like the ending of the film. But what I can say is, despite my shakiness on the end of the film, it's ultimately a film that is very well made, very well acted. It's an incredibly strong feature-length debut as a writer and director for the director of this film, Michael Shanks. Kudos to him for making a movie like this. This is not an easy film to make. This is an incredibly ambitious first feature for any director. And so to see the fact that I think for the most part, it's like really solid and very well made, and you have these incredible lead performances from these two actors that are actually married and were able to kind of employ that real life chemistry with one another in this film, as well as having these nice, eerie, creepy, unsettling moments. I think this is easily one of the most unique horror films that I've seen in recent years. It's easily probably one of the most unique, if not the most unique horror film I've seen this year in 2025. And I think it has a lot to say about relationships. And I think if you're somebody who has been in a toxic relationship or you're currently in a toxic relationship, you're probably going to take something away from this. But just in general, if you're also just a fan of horror, the film is mostly a really fun watch and keeps you engaged and definitely has its eerie, creepy element, while also kind of having an ending that's either going to work for you or not work for you. So I don't really know how I feel about the ending yet, but I ultimately found Together to be a film that is worth your time if you're looking for something different, if you're looking for something just weird in the horror genre, if you're a sucker for body horror, All of those things are really well done here, and despite the shaky ending, I think this film is certainly worth your time. So that's going to be my long rambly thoughts on Together. Definitely want to hear what you guys have to say, so leave some comments down below. Have you had a chance to check this film out? Have you not checked it out? Did you like it? Did you not like it? Whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below, and I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.